the station that serves the community. I mean, I'm still trying to perfect my voice, Rich, because you got to hear it before the show starts.
And then after.
Yeah, I mean, because Brian, engineer extraordinaire, always plays this audio of whomever else who's recorded that. I'm not sure who it is. I don't even think he knows who it is. Probably started before he started.
Brian's looking like, what are you talking about?
What are you guys talking about? Yeah, because this station has been around like forever and a day. It's just a lot of great people before you. As we, this episode, I forgot to name it at the beginning. I don't want to name it 9/11.
No,
I will name it Never Forget.
That's a good one.
We'll leave it at that. Want to talk to you about 9/11, your memory of where you were that day 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I'll real quickly give you the abridged version. I was in Tampa, Florida, working at PricewaterhouseCoopers. I was right outside their data center. They're standing near their call support center. So I was down there with my wife at the time, and I had moved. I had relocated. Now, funny as it may seem, 6 days before, I happened to be in New York for Labor Day. We came here just to stop in and check in on family and everything else like that. So here it is, the morning, September 11th. I was driving in on I-4 to I-75 to I-275. It's about a 30-40 minute drive. So I get into the support center, and I'm walking around, and we try to go to, for some reason, internet was slow that morning. Even back then, through a LAN connection.
ISDN.
Yes. It was slow. So I'm like, well, what in the world's going on here? So we couldn't get out, outside traffic. So at that point, and I was sharing the story with my daughter this morning as we were going to church. I said to her, yeah, guess what? This is this is what was happening. I said, you don't know about this because you were in your mother's stomach at the time, So we're there. There's no access. Someone mentions that a plane hit, the World Trade Center tower. And I was like, what? They push out a TV in the support center. And then they push out a second one. Because back then, we were still on PBX phone system and everything, so it wasn't totally like VoIP or anything. And we're watching it, and I'm sitting there, and, totally filled with emotion like everyone else. And I'm trying to dial home. I'm trying to call my parents at home, and I couldn't get through.
Yep, all services were down. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there, and I call my wife, and I'm like, are you watching this? She was like, I can't believe what I'm watching. So at that point, I left. I left the center. I left. I jumped back in my car. I drove another 40 minutes to get home. And I said, okay, let me stop off at the store. I went to stop off at the local Walmart. What did I see on Brandon Boulevard? None other than the military in the street.
Yep.
I don't even know back then if they had AR-15s.
Yep, they did. They had it enforced.
In their hands, and I'm like, I stopped, and at the time I was driving my red Ford Explorer, and I just totally stopped. Everything came to a stop because you saw the military in the street. Rifles were out.
Yep.
Assault rifles were out. I made it into Walmart. It was really jam packed, and I said, "Well, what in the world's going on here?" And I said, okay, well, I mean, of course I knew what was going on that day, but I saw a very, very long line. And I'm like, what is this long line for? It was people buying ammo.
Yeah.
And people buying assault rifles.
Yep.
Rich.
Yep.
And I made it home. And, of course, you hugged your loved ones. And eventually we were able to get in contact with our family. And, you fast forward to today, 15 years later, we are here today. What are your memories?
Well, now, of course, I was in New York at the time, and I was working on Long Island. So get up for a normal day at work, get into the office. Everything was fine when I got in the office. Then went downstairs. I think it was to get some coffee. And in between that time, I'm walking by, and everyone is sitting there staring at the TV,
Right.
just watching what's going on. Like, and I'm in the back of the group, trying to see what's going on. And you see the smoke rising from the tower. Like, oh, man. And they say, yeah, a plane hit the tower. Now, at the time, I was doing some flight lessons. I've always had a thing for aviation, so I have a little aviation knowledge. I was already thinking planes to hit the World Trade Center accidentally. It's like throwing a piece of thread to go to go through a needle. It's almost impossible for that to happen.
Right.
But let's see where this plays out. Then of course we're all looking at it, we're watching, and then what happens? What was it? An hour later, whatever, when all the cameras are rolling, bam, the other aircraft hits. Then of course everyone's like, "Oh man, we know this is an attack." They're calling it an attack at this point. Try to get on the phones. Like you said, you couldn't get a phone call through anywhere. The lines were down because, of course, the antenna was on top of the World Trade Center. That antenna fed wireless for everything downtown and most of half of Manhattan. So yeah, I'm calling. I get in contact with my wife at home. She was not working in the city at the time. She was at home. Of course, she's asking me, "Do you see what's going on?" It's like, yeah, it seems like there's an attack. Then we start hearing about the other aircraft over in Pennsylvania,
Right.
and you start hearing about the one that went down by the Pentagon,
Right.
And they're like, this is a full scale attack on the country.
Right.
My goddaughter went to school 2 blocks away from the World Trade Center, and we're trying to get in contact with her, and no one can get in contact with her.
Wow.
We get home. Where everyone finds their way to get out of the city. I get home. I was in Long Island, like I said. So I get home an hour, 45 minutes later. We're talking about ways to shut down the Manhattan offices of the company I worked for at the time, so everyone can get out cleanly. We make those arrangements. By 4 o'clock, I think it was in the afternoon, we still hadn't heard from my goddaughter. So I'm talking to her father, her mother, like, has anyone heard anything? Anyone seen anything? It was by 8 o'clock that night. She gets a phone call in. She was fortunate enough to get on a ferry out of like Bowling Green over to New Jersey. And then she got from Jersey some way, I guess there was another ferry, I forget exactly how, to get back into New York and then to make her way home to Queens. But that day, that's one of the things that anyone who was alive at the time, just like those who were alive when Kennedy was killed,
Right.
Those who were about the same age, everyone remembers the Challenger disaster. They know where they were when that happened.
Yes, correct.
You know where you were when the World Trade Center happened. These life events that are indelible, stuck in your memory, in the
Correct.
country's memory forever.
It's so true. And that's the attack in the 90s. That's the attack in 2001.
Yep, I remember that 90s one too.
Right. It's like this type of stuff is just burned into you.
Yep.
Or burned into, your brain, your just overall emotions. It's wow.
I thought it was a shame that it took so long for them to rebuild the buildings. The politics of
The
New
politics. It's just the politics.
York, but it's what they built. Not that what I think matters. I like the new building.
Right.
I don't think it's ostentatious at all. It's a symbol. They had to rebuild a symbol.
Right.
It serves its purpose, I think.
What was sad was September 2015, the James Zildrogas Act, when that wasn't renewed. And there was like a small break between September and then with the politicians finally getting, their act together in November of 2015.